Hello again, Dr. Jimmy. It's still September 10th. It's still 6 days to Halloween Horror Nights 26. Oh boy, less than a week to go. And so I'm now making more of these wonderful Who's Who, Horror Nights Who's Who videos, so that you know exactly who you might meet when you walk through the streets or a haunted house at Horror Nights. And one of the people you're likely to run into this year in Orlando, and probably also in Hollywood, is Michael Myers. Now you think, well, gee, we already know quite a bit about Michael Myers. Do you really? I'm going to go into the background of the mysterious Michael Myers. And of course, as you probably already know, Michael Myers is a Canadian comic actor who first came to prominence on the television program Saturday Night Live in the early 1990s, where he played such memorable sketch comedy roles as the proprietor of a little shop that only sold items from Scotland, because if it's not Scottish, it's crap! Or the host of a German music program called Sprockets. And now it is time for all of us on Sprockets to dance. I am happy like a little girl. And then of course there was Wayne, probably his best character on Saturday Night Live. A young man, adolescent, who with his partner Garth, his friend Garth, had a public access television program that they put on in their parents' basement, where Wayne of course had his bedroom. And there were a couple of righteous dudes, sort of like Bill and Ted in a way. They had similar vocal mannerisms of bogus and, you know, and excellent, that sort of thing. That was in their vocabulary, and they had a wonderful little thing. And that of course was so popular that it was made into a major motion picture, Wayne's World, which too was a huge hit. And that led to more popularity for Mr. Myers as he moved from television now into the cinema world, and he was able to make other big hits, especially the Austin Powers movie, where he played a rather groovy spy as a bit of a parody on James Bond. He was sort of randy and groovy, yes, and he also played Dr. Evil in the same one. Very, very clever, and his career was really taking off until he made a horrible film called The Love Guru. And pretty much went in the toilet after that, and the only thing he's really done successfully since then is the Shrek, doing the voiceover Scottish accent for the Shrek character in various Shrek movies. What? That's not the Michael Myers that's going to be at Horror Nights this year? Oh! I'm sorry. There's more than one? Oh. Oh, of course. You're thinking of the one from Halloween. Yes, of course. Strangely enough, though, I do want to point something out. Now that I've had my bit of fun, stop and think about it. In Austin Powers, actually, I should point out, no, in Halloween, Donald Pleasance plays a doctor who says that Michael Myers is evil, pure evil, yes. In Austin Powers, Michael Myers plays Dr. Evil as an impersonation of Donald Pleasance. Mind blown! Yes, that's true, because he was doing a parody of Donald Pleasance as he appeared in You Only Live Twice. But I have to wonder, you know, Michael Myers is of a certain age, so that he probably was a little boy when the movie Halloween came out, and so he probably went all the way through grade school and especially high school with that name. And all the other kids, even up in Canada, would be like, look out, it's the boogeyman, it's Michael Myers, run, he'll get you. Especially on Halloween. It probably warped his little brain. It might explain the sort of comedy he does. I don't know if it explained the Love Guru, though. Nothing can explain the Love Guru. No. But anyway, it might have been that he did that whole Donald Pleasant shtick in Austin Powers to get back at him. Yeah, we'll show you who's evil. Yeah. Pure evil. The blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. Yes, exactly. Mr. Bigglesworth doesn't like pure evil. Anyway, so what about Michael Myers in the movies? Well, we have to talk about Halloween. Where did that come from? What, the holiday? No, 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 no. The movie! This might end up being more than one part. I'm sorry. I may have a lot to say here. No, it's a fellow named John Carpenter, of course. He made the movie Halloween back in 1978, but he was very young back then, just getting started in cinema. He'd made a student film, I think at UCLA. Not certain, I might be wrong about that. He made a student film at university, wherever it was, and it was a science fiction, low budget thing, and then he added a little bit to it and made it into a cinematic feature called Dark Star. That was all nice, but worked with a guy named Dan O'Bannon, who later went on to make a film called Alien. Isn't that cool? But he needed to make a movie that make his name in cinema, and he liked horror movies, and horror movies always the best way to break in, but he was kind of into that anyway, so it was perfect. So he was trying to come up with a really groovy idea that could really set the thing. So there's Mr. Carpenter. There's a young man from Kentucky, but he didn't really stay there. But he was thinking, there's, you know, lots of these stories go around about mad killers and teenagers, you know, sort of urban legend thing, right? And especially a lot of them about babysitters. You know, there's that real famous one where the phone rings and the babysitter, and then it's just someone breathing ominously or making threats, and whatever it is. So she calls the police, and they trace the call, and they call right back and say, "Get out of the house! The call is coming from inside the house." You know, it's a very famous story. Now, it wasn't necessarily based on that one. They actually made a movie based on that one a little bit later. Someone else made it with Carol Kane. It was called Stranger in the House. But before that, you know, hearing these babysitter type stories, you thought, let's do a movie that's similar to all these stories about babysitters. We'll call it the Babysitter Murders. And we'll have a mad killer killing babysitters while they're watching children in houses. That would make a good idea for a horror film. And he's working on the plot, the script, trying to come up with it. But then he has an inspiration. Set the thing on Halloween. Oh, now there's some controversy about this. There's some controversy. There's another filmmaker named Bob Clark, and he made a movie a few years before that called Black Christmas. Now, it's a very different sort of film. It's not really slasher like Halloween or Friday the 13th. It's more of a creepy mystery in a girl's dormitory over Christmas holidays, and it seems to be more soap opera about the girls. There is a mad killer in the attic, apparently, but it's all kind of weird and twisted and a bit demented. It's not very much, it doesn't follow the slasher patterns very much at all. But it is a very creepy little horror film, and you never really find out who's really doing it. It's all kind of weird. But he was thinking he might follow up Black Christmas, which was not the first horror movie set at Christmas. There have been lots of those before that. In the early 70s, one called Silent Night, Bloody Night was a British film. Another British film was called Tales from the Crypt. The original film version of Tales from the Crypt was made in Britain, and that one, they did the adaptation of the famous Tales from the Crypt comic book story about a woman who is stalked by a maniac in a Santa suit. Turns out the woman's not very nice herself, and she kind of deserves what she gets. All Through the Night is the name of the story from the Tales from the Crypt comic book. Back in the 50s, they made the same story again when they did the TV program. They used the same comic book story to make an episode. So there's two different versions that have been filmed of that one comic book story. A movie made in Britain in the early 70s, and later the HBO version that came out in the 80s, I think it was, early 90s. I think it was the 80s, the first episodes. And of course, there have been horror Christmas-themed horror films made since then, and Bob Clark himself made A Christmas Story, which isn't actually a horror movie, although it has some dark moments. It's more of a family film nowadays, and when it first came out, though, it was considered really edgy. I mean, it was really considered edgy and a kind of extreme, and oh my goodness. Now it's like a family favorite classic. It's like, it just shows how times change. Now put your tongue on that, frozen Paul. Yeah. But Clark was thinking about following up Black Christmas with another horror film set around Halloween. And then John Carpenter starts making his film, and Clark thinks, you stole my idea. And I don't think there's any real evidence that somehow John Carpenter learned of Bob Clark and stole his script and redid it or something, because it was basically his original Babysitter Killers. He just added it to Halloween. But Clark thinks he for sure, I mean, well, until the day he died, because he did die a few years ago, he was sure that he'd been ripped off somehow. I don't necessarily believe it myself. In fact, I don't. Because John Carpenter surely is not the sort of person who needs to rip off other people's ideas. I've seen his movies, they're pretty damn inventive and weird. So, setting it at Halloween was a masterstroke. You know, all kinds of stuff about the holiday behind all of it, and especially the legend of the boogeyman, which we'll get to in a bit. Maybe in another video, because it's already past 11 minutes. So the film, of course, deals with a little boy named Michael Myers. We first encounter him as he's being babysat by his sister Judith on Halloween night 1963, I believe. I don't remember if that's the right year. I hope it is, because if it is, it will be the very first Halloween of my life. So that would be not lovely if that were, in fact, the year it was supposed to be. But just about right. And he's there, and what happens is he's being babysat, and like many babysitters before and since, Judith takes advantage of parents being out of the house to have a boyfriend over for a quick shag, or at least a massive making out session. And then, you know, babysitter leaves afterwards. I'm not the babysitter, the boyfriend leaves, and Michael apparently is put out by all that, to such an extent that he goes completely mad. Is it just because he saw his sister fucking his boyfriend? I don't know what it is. It could, of course, Dr. Loomis would say, no, it had nothing to do with that. It just happens, coincidence, it just happens to be the time when he revealed that he was pure evil. Whatever it is, the little boy, wearing a clown outfit for Halloween trick-or-treats, goes to the kitchen and gets a big sharp butcher knife, gets his clown mask and puts it on, goes upstairs, finds his sister with her top off because she's changing her clothes, and proceeds to stab, stabbity stab. Oh, that's the end of Judith Myers. Then he goes downstairs, where his parents have just got home, and find him all bloody with a knife and take the clown mask off, and it's a cute, adorable little boy, but he's just sort of staring into space with the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes, staring into space, and they say, Michael? And don't know what the hell happened. So, 15 years later, which would be 1978, right? Michael is in a mental institution. He hasn't spoken a single word. He just sits there and stares. And yet, amazingly, he somehow learns how to operate a motor vehicle and is able to drive all the way back to Haddonfield like some kind of homing pigeon, or one of those lost pets you hear about that runs across the country and comes home with bloody paws when you got left behind in Los Angeles when you're on your family trip and Doggy got out the door, and oh no, what happened to Doggy? Oh, he's lost. And you drive back to, you know, Oklahoma or wherever you were, and somehow the doggy makes it from LA to Oklahoma on its own, using its homing instinct. Oh, miraculous. Or perhaps something more sinister in Myers' case. They actually make a joke about it. How did he even learn how to drive? I don't know. Maybe somebody taught him. You know, that kind of... Who would have taught him to drive? And he's in his padded cell. He's probably never even seen a motor car since he was a little boy, and yet somehow he knows how to drive a car and drives it back. Of course, he also stops to murder a garage mechanic and steal his overalls, so he has a nice, nifty outfit to wear. And then he stops at a local shop in Haddonfield and steals a mask that looks surprisingly like William Shatner from Star Trek, only all pale white and blotchy, with big shock of brown hair, all messed up, and wears this mask for the rest of the movie. Becomes his signature look, basically, and starts stalking the teenagers of the town, especially a nice young lady named Laurie Strode, who's played by Jamie Lee Curtis. Now, she's a good girl, crazy about Elvis. Sorry. She's a nice girl. She doesn't smoke cigarettes. She doesn't do drugs. Doesn't shoot up. Doesn't drink liquor. You know, she doesn't do that either. She doesn't have premarital sex with her. She doesn't even have a steady boyfriend. Although she really likes that Ben Tramer boy she keeps hearing about. She's a nice girl, really nice. But her friends are slutty hoes. Oh God. So of course she's going to be watching Little Brat on Halloween night for babysitting, and some of her slutty friends are also doing something like that, and they think perfect time for them to come over and procreate in the house. Meanwhile, Dr. Loomis somehow knows that Michael will get back to Haddonfield. Doesn't make a lick of sense, but there it is. So he goes back to Haddonfield, tells Sheriff Brackett, let's find him. So they're hunting for Michael, finding the old Myers house and evidence that he came home when he decorates it with his sister's dead tombstone and shit. So, except he doesn't show up at that house. He goes to visit Laurie Strode and her friends' houses. And sure enough, on Halloween night, while they're babysitting, he shows up and starts stalking them, and of course kills off all the slutty kids, and then starts stalking Laurie, but Laurie never gets killed. Somehow she's more resourceful. She protects the little kids, little Tommy Wallace. I'm sorry, not Tommy Wallace. Tommy Doyle and Lindsay Wallace, who's played by Kyle Richards, who is doomed for all time because she's going to grow up to be a Beverly Hills housewife on Bravo, whose older sister Kim has gone completely wacko, even though she used to be a wonderful kid in Disney movies back in the day, from Witch Mountain. And both of them are Paris Hilton's aunts. Did you know that? The little kids from Witch Mountain, and little Kyle Richards and little Kim Richards, they're the aunts of Paris Hilton. Anyway. But she married, like a very wealthy real estate agent, and converted to Judaism, and is appearing on Bravo's Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. But, oh well, she still needs a babysitter. Anyway, but that's a trivia. So, now Laurie will stab Michael in the head with a knife and poke him in the eye with a coat hanger, but he just keeps doing the old getting back up maneuver. Oh dear. And eventually, when all seems lost, here shows up Dr. Loomis, and it's bang, 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 bangity bang, and out the window goes Michael. He's got 6 bullets. Actually, it sounds like 7 shots to me, which is unnatural, but falls out the window. You see him lying quite clearly dead. All these bullet holes through his body. He must be dead. Totally, utterly, completely dead. Goody. Except when they look again, he's not there. He got up and left. Huh? And Laurie says, it was the boogeyman. And of course, Dr. Loomis says, as a matter of fact, it was. And we all heard about the boogeyman earlier because little Tommy Doyle keeps being bothered by his friends. The boogeyman's going to get you. The boogeyman's going to get you. So we'll have to talk about the boogeyman later. That's the first film. All right? That's the first film. So it all starts out with a fairly normal little boy who's maybe brain damaged or whatever. He goes bonkers, becomes a serial killer, I suppose, although it's very weird doesn't have a lick of the supernatural until the very end, because he just doesn't seem to die very easily, even after being stabbed in the head and shot, and then shot multiple times. He gets up, leaves. So, is he the boogeyman? Is that true? Is there something supernatural going on? That's implied, but not really made explicit. Now we get to Halloween 2. I'm not going to go into a rapid detail of every single scene of Halloween 2. Basically, it continues right where the first one left off. Michael Myers is still after Laurie Strode. She's taken to hospital, of course, and in hospital, somehow, for some reason, Myers is still after her. He's focused on her. He goes to different houses and kills all sorts of people trying to make his way there. Stupid Ben Tramer, by the way, puts on an outfit just like Michael Myers, gets hit by a car and dies. So Laurie's never going to have that date, although she's interested in a boy named Jimmy working as an intern over at the hospital. Except he slips on something. Oh well. Anyway, there was a little bit that they added to the first movie in a TV edit that wasn't in the cinema. The name Samhain, S-A-M-H-A-I-N. It's Samhain, but it's pronounced Samhain. It's the Celtic word for Halloween. Now, where would Michael have picked that up? He scrawls it on a chalkboard on his way to Haddonfield, apparently. Is there some connection to Myers and the ancient Celtic religion? That's implied there, and they'll get more into that later. So, here comes the mystery. Why is Michael so infatuated with Laurie Strode? And then we discover, in the course of the movie, Dr. Loomis uncovers that, in fact, Laurie Strode was born with a different name. I don't know what her real first name is off the top of my head, but her last name was Myers. After Michael went batshit and was taken to the sanitarium, Mr. and Mrs. Myers had another baby. But they had all kinds of other problems from the other two children being killed. I don't remember exactly what happened to them. Maybe they committed suicide or something, whatever it was. The little kid had to go. Maybe they died in an accident. The little baby was adopted by the Strodes, who never told her her true origin. And so Laurie Strode was actually Michael Myers' kid sister all along. And when he came back to Haddonfield, he came to track her down. That means Laurie Strode is only supposed to be 15 years old or younger in this movie, and clearly Jamie Lee Curtis is in her early 20s, but oh well, that's the way they do it in these movies. I mean, 15? That's not even a high school senior. You assume she's a high school senior. She'd have to be like a freshman or a sophomore or something. I mean, she'd have to be rather young, kid, but that's, you know, it's not the way they played her. Anyway. So, that explains why Michael Myers is after her. Somehow he knows this is his sister. Maybe he knows that only his sister can free him. I don't know. But eventually, in a climactic scene, it is Laurie who kills Michael by shooting him in the head with Dr. Loomis's gun twice. Once through both of his eyes. So if he's not dead, he has to be completely blind. And he's set on fire and burns up. And so Laurie escapes, and Michael is supposed to be really completely dead at the end of Halloween 2. Which is why they made Halloween 3. It had nothing to do with Michael Myers, but with some creepy old Celtic Irish curse through Stonehenge and little chips of Stonehenge put into Halloween masks that would come alive on Halloween and cause all kinds of verminous creatures to crawl out of little kids' bodies and kill them in a blood sacrifice to the old gods. Season of the Witch. I like that one, actually, even though it's, you know, happy Halloween, 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 Silver Shamrock. I like that movie. But there was a reference to it in the previous Halloween House in 2014. They had the little TV advert there along with The Thing, which is the movie they were watching in the movie. Movies and movies. So, Halloween 3, of course, has nothing to do with Myers, but they brought him back several more times. They started making more of these movies in the late 80s. Halloween 4, Halloween 5. I don't remember the subtitles. One was The Return of Michael Myers, one was The Curse of Michael Myers, one was the, I don't know, The Unattractive Left Toenail of Michael Myers. I mean, that's not what it was called, but there were 3 Halloween movies that came out two in the 80s, 88, 89, and the next one wasn't until I think 1996 or something, or the early 90s. And all of them are all based on the idea that Laurie Strode grew up, had a baby, and they named it Jamie. Haha, Jamie Lee Curtis, right? But then she dies in an accident, and the little girl is raised by her aunt, and she doesn't know that she is, in fact, the niece of Michael Myers. Doesn't know that. She's a nice little kid. Doesn't know she's the niece of Michael Myers. But Michael, who wasn't dead at all at the end of Halloween 2, and comes back after all these fucking years, now that his little niece is like 7, 8 years old, whatever it is going to track her down and kill her because he wants to wipe out his whole family bloodline, apparently. And so she starts having this weird, freaky, almost psychic connection. We start getting into the supernatural more. There's a psychic connection. She starts seeing Michael when he's not there, even though she doesn't supposed to even know about him. You know, having visions and shit. And Michael starts stalking his way, and Dr. Loomis somehow has figured it out, and he's trying to get Michael and uses Jamie as bait. But eventually, it appears that Michael is killed again, and everything seems to be okay. Finally, the evil's dead, except that Jamie, at the end of the movie, pulls out her own knife and stabs someone wearing a clown outfit and gives the evil stare that Michael did in the first movie. Oh my God, now she's going to be the shape, only she'll be a girl shape instead of a boy shape, which means it's this sort of shape instead of this sort of shape, but it's still wearing the white William Shatner mask. Is that what's going to happen? No. No, it was just a little moment of confusion. The next movie came out the very next year, that's part 5, and Jamie's alright, quite sane, a little bit troubled, and Dr. Loomis didn't trust her. He was going to shoot her at the end of the previous movie, kill her, but no, now he's okay. But he still wants to use her as bait, because Myers is still out there. He's vanished from the morgue. He's out there somewhere. He's going to cause trouble, and again they go through the whole bullshit of using her as bait. But in this case, it seems like Myers is killed and his body is at the morgue, but somebody comes and takes it away. A mysterious man in black. What the fuck? Now we're getting into some really weird shit. A mysterious man in black shows up and steals a body, and it's unexplained. What the fuck is going on? The next one came out a few years later, but the idea is that now little Jamie has grown up. The mysterious man in black has abducted her from her family, and she's been raised somewhere else and doesn't even remember who she really is. Now she's pregnant, had to have a kid of her own. Michael Myers comes back from the dead yet again. And the man in black, whoever he is, we don't know. He's called the Thorn. But there's a whole cult of ancient Celtic worshippers. So there has the connection to Celtic mythology all along. That somehow all of this from the original movie had to do with Samhain and the ancient Irish religion, and there's some sort of blood sacrifice, and Myers is somehow supposed to be sacrificing his family or whatever it is. And they're going to use it to get the seed, which would be, of course, Jamie's daughter. Ultimately it ends with Myers apparently dying and disappearing again, and maybe, we don't know what happens. Jamie gets away, I guess her baby is safe, but both Dr. Loomis and Michael Myers are in a death struggle. We never find out what happens. There's screaming. It's assumed one or both are killed. It was the last movie Donald Pleasence was able to be in. He kept doing his Halloween movies until he was in very frail health, but he knew he could always get a paycheck by doing these movies, so he kept at it. That would seem to be the end. But then they brought it back again later in the 1990s. And this time they called it, I think it was 98, because it was called H2O, meaning Halloween 20 years later. And it had to do with Laurie Strode, who was supposed to have been dead, so it completely retconned. Part 4, 5, and 6 were thrown out completely, and now the idea is that those never happened. There's no Thorn, there's no Celtic cult, it's just the first two movies way back in, were the only ones that are actually canon now, according to this one. And now Laurie Strode had changed her name, had a kid who's like a teenage boy now, and she's now the headmistress of a school somewhere, a boarding school. And everything's hunky-dory, except somehow Michael Myers comes back from the dead and tracks her down again, and starts to kill everybody. And eventually, at the boarding school during the holidays, when no one's going to be there except for one security guard. Ultimately, what happens? Lots of people die, and Laurie finally gets rid of Michael herself by lopping his freaking head off. You actually see Laurie Strode decapitate Michael Myers. That's it, end of story. No more Michael Myers. But wait, and then we'll have to go to a part 2 because I've exceeded a half hour and I don't want to go any more than that in any one video.